Hi everyone, this channel mainly shares knowledge about solar panels. Welcome to subscribe to my channel and turn on the bell so you won't miss any updates. If this video is helpful to you, please like and share. If you have any opinions or questions about the content, just leave a comment and I will reply to you at the first time. Well, let's get started. When connecting solar panels, the two common configurations are series and parallel. Before you can start reaping the great benefits of solar energy, you need to figure out which system setup is best suited for your energy needs. For a quick explanation, the main differences between solar panels connected in series and parallel: the output voltage and output current. The output voltage of a series connected solar panel is up, while the output current remains constant. On the other hand, solar panels connected in parallel will have an increased output current, but their output voltage will be the same. So, in short, for solar panels connected in series, you add up the voltage, while for solar panels connected in parallel, you add up the current ranges. There are some concepts we need to understand. Voltage refers to the difference in electric potential between 2 points. Current, it is the rate of charge that is flowing through a circuit. Amperage is the voltage that is related to a device, such as a generator or a voltage regulator. Output current, this refers to a maximum current that can be supplied to a load. Let's walk you through connecting solar panels in series and parallel and choose what was better for you. How do I wire a solar panel? There are key metrics to keep in mind when connecting solar panels to voltage and current. And given solar power system has a minimum and maximum capacity, this limit affects how fast to connect the panels together. Different solar panels have different voltages and currents. You need to connect them to balance solar system to maximize the input without exceeding the maximum capacity of the power station of solar generators. Often, you need to connect multiple solar panels to a single power station. The way the panels are connected to each other and the balance of the system affects how efficiently the solar array captures and stores energy. What are series connected solar panels and how do they work? Solar panels in series are connected in chain configuration. In this setup, the positive pole of one panel is connected to the negative pole of the next panel, which increases the total system voltage. And with this configuration, the system voltage matters the total voltage of all the panels. If you have 5 panels with 12 volts each, the total voltage is 60 volts. The current remains the same as the individual panels. This series connection is ideal when the goal is a higher system voltage, such as for a grid tile application. Series connected solar panels are great for no shaded conditions and low current system. What are parallel solar panels and how do they work? In a parallel configuration, solar panels are connected side by side with positive poles connected to each other and negative poles connected to each other. This setup allows the voltage to be the same as that of the individual panels while increasing the total current. A parallel connection will allow your solar panels to produce energy without exceeding operating voltage limits of the generator inverter. Parallel connections are useful when the goal is higher system current. Solar panel series versus parallel. Pros and cons. When deciding between series and parallel connection of solar panels, it is important to evaluate your specific needs and system requirements. The choice depends on a variety of factors, including voltage and current requirements, power output needs, available space, and module capability. Let's explore the advantages and disadvantages of series wiring. Usually, higher voltage means higher power output, allowing you to charge solar cells faster and store power for later. No need for bulky cables and components due to lower total amperage. Series connection reduces power loss due to long-distance transmission due to higher voltage. Ideal for unshaded areas, series connections are usually more efficient in low light conditions. Cons. The performance of a series configuration is determined by the worst performing panel. An obstruction or poor performance of one panel means they all perform poorly. This requires a higher voltage tolerant inverter. Next, let's discuss the pros and cons of parallel wiring. Pros. Failure or poor performance of one panel will not affect the other panels. The impact on the whole system will be minimized. Ideal for small lower voltage systems, e.g. caravans, balcony systems. Lower voltage means less potential electric risk. Cons. Parallel systems require more wiring and more complex installation, requiring greater capacity. If panels are not identical, this can cause damage and reduce overall solar system efficiency. Solar panel series versus parallel, which is better? Now that we understand the difference between series and parallel solar panels, how do we really choose? Well, it really depends on your application scenario. If your solar panels spend most of the time in an unshaded area, then series connected solar panels are usually preferred. The main reason for this is that your solar panel system will be more efficient and perform better at the beginning and the end of the day. And on cloudy days, batteries requires a higher than standard voltage to charge, and parallel connection requires a high capacity to operate. Undoubtedly, increasing our budget would buy more solar panels. Paralleling solar panels isn't necessarily a bad option either. If we build our solar system in series, then you will also need an MPPT charge controllers to make the system work. And MPPT charge controllers are generally more expensive and maybe more of a budget for a small low voltage system. If you have an RV boat for lighting or a simple low voltage electrical condition, then choosing parallel must be a perfect decision. This type of low voltage solar system can be used with lower cost PWM charge controllers as a way to lower your budget. Voltage and current in series and parallel solar panels. Voltage is a measure of electrical potential or force. Amperage is the unit of current. An easy way to think about the relationship between the two is that voltage is the water pressure that pushes the water through the pipe, and amperage is the rate of flow of water through the pipe. When connecting panels in series via solar panel connectors, the voltage of all panels are added together. This means that the total voltage increases while the current stays at the panel with the lowest current strength. In the case of water in pipe, you increase the potential pressure, but not the actual water flow rate. On the other hand, when connected in parallel, the current increases, but not the voltages. This means that you increase the flow rate, but not the pressure. When deciding whether to connect in series or parallel, it is important to be aware of the voltage and the current strength of all panels, as well as the requirement and elimination of the balance of the system, such as inverters, microinverters, solar cells, and charge controllers. This way, you can determine the best way to wire your equipment to maximize power generation without exceeding the maximum that your solar power system can handle. Ultimate. Understanding the difference between series and parallel connection of solar panels is critical. to optimizing the performance of your solar system. Carefully evaluate your system requirements, power output needs, and specific applications to choose the right configuration. Whether you choose to connect in series or in parallel, using solar energy offers many benefits, including a reduced carbon footprint, energy independence, and long-term cost savings. Embrace renewable energy and contribute to a sustainable future. If you have any questions about solar panels in series versus parallel, you are welcome to contact our team at any time, and we will answer your questions and provide you with the optimal solution for your needs. We have the best Japanese solar system panels and RV solutions. Frequently asked questions about series versus parallel connection of solar panels. Which type of wiring works better, series or parallel? No particular type of wiring is better overall than another. However, you may find out one type of wiring is better for your particular solar system. Different factors come into play here. For example, parallel solar panels operate independently for each other. They are best suited for partial light situations or when some of your panels be in shadow for part of the day. Also, series wiring is better suited for sunny open spaces where there is nothing to block the sun's rays. Can I mix series and parallel solar panels? Yes. It is possible and common to mix series and parallel solar panels in a solar panel array. By combining the two wiring configurations, it is possible to create a solar panel array that meets the voltage and current requirements of your specific application. For example, multiple series screens can be connected in parallel if a higher voltage is required, while multiple parallel screens can be connected in series if a higher current is required. It is important to ensure that the solar panels you connect have similar electrical characteristics, such as voltages and current ratings, to prevent mismatches from leading to reduced system efficiency or even damage to these panels. In addition, proper fuse and wiring design should be used to ensure safe and reliable operations of your solar panel array. Can flexible solar panels be connected in series? Connecting more than one flexible solar panel in series, in parallel, or in a mixed mode is an effective and easy way not only to build a cost-effective solar panel system, but also help us to add more flexible solar panels in the future to meet our increasing daily needs for electricity. Should 12-volt solar panels be wired in series or parallel? Series wiring involves connecting multiple panels together so that the voltages are combined to increase the total output. On the other hand, parallel wiring involves connecting each panel directly to the battery or load, which increases the current output. Each method has its advantages depending on what you are looking for. Series wiring can be useful if you need to increase the voltage to a certain level, while parallel wiring can be useful if you need to increase the current to power a larger load. Can you add more solar panels to an existing system? Yes. Creating a comprehensive tiny house energy system from the start helps ensure that you choose the components that best suit your needs. However, this isn't always possible. You may not have the funds to invest all the necessary equipment upfront. It's also common for people to underestimate their electricity needs, so they choose to expand their system later. If you think you might want to add to the system over time, choose an oversized inverter to accommodate future energy capture. The solar panels charge faster in series or parallel. There's no definitive answer as to whether series or parallel wiring will charge your batteries faster. This is because there are many factors that affect charging speed. For example, If wired in parallel, the voltage is usually lower than when wired in series. By wiring in parallel, your panel must run at a higher resistance to maintain the minimum voltage required. This means that, in general, series wiring may mean faster charging times. Additionally, I have compiled a comprehensive PDF document on the industry application of solar panels. You can click the link in the descriptions, fill in your information, consult us to obtain it for free. Welcome to subscribe to my channel. I will continue to share more valuable content related to solar panels. Now, I would like to hear your opinions. What are your experience with series and parallel connections of solar panels? Let's discuss together in this comment section.